So this is Stephanie Clark, Chair of the Public Records Advisory Council and State Archivist. It is February 5th. This is the Public Records Advisory Council meeting, and we have Emily. Emily for the win. Emily, hi. Thank you for joining us. You have now given us quorum. So if we do have to vote on anything, we can, and this doesn't just have to be an informational meeting. So thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. So I'm looking at my list of members. I have Emilyhurst, Les Zeitz, Rob Bovett, Mark Landauer, and Tony Hernandez. Have I missed any council members today? Okay. Well, if others join, we will acknowledge them. I do see Senator Thatcher on the phone. Do we have Representative Power on the phone? Okay. Well, I think the first thing I'd like to do is request a motion to approve today's agenda. I will add a caveat to that. I just got the meeting minutes up on Wednesday. I don't know that folks have had enough time to review them, so I would like to table that piece of the agenda. So our agenda would really just be focusing on myself providing information about bills, and we have a couple of folks that want to share information with the council. So it would just be item 3, discussing bills relating to public records, would be the agenda today.
Do you need a motion to approve that?
Yes, please.
All right, the discussion. Okay, yeah, there's my motion.
Thank you.
Well,
all those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Do we have a quorum now?
We do. Emily joined us and saved the day.
Yeah, great. I'll approve as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Okay. So that brings us right to some updates from me regarding various bills and things that we talked about in the last meeting. So I'm just going to launch right into it. Senate Bill 500, which is the Public Records Advocate independence bill that we so carefully talked about and discussed in the last meeting, and I provided our suggested or requested amendments to Legislative Council. That bill has been scheduled for a hearing for next Thursday, February 11th at 8 a.m. I have heard back from Legislative Council that they will have that amendment up and ready in advance of that hearing. So thank you very much to them for getting that together. And thank you, Senator Thatcher, for connecting me with Dexter to make all of that happen. I will prepare testimony on behalf of the PRAC in support of this bill. It is our bill, so I think we can all agree we want to support it. But I will say, if any council members would like to also submit testimony, I think that is a great idea. If you want to sign up to testify virtually, that's also great. But written testimony also works, and I did send out instructions on how to sign up to testify and how to submit testimony earlier. So any comments on that or questions about SB 500? No. Okay. I had another piece of homework from you all last week, and that was to follow up with more information on House Bill 2224. I did send all of you an informational one-pager that I received from Representative Wilde. And I just want to let you know that from what I understand, Representative Wilde is not planning on requesting a hearing for this bill at this time. So from where I'm sitting, I don't think that there's any further action needed from this council. But if I hear anything different, I will absolutely bring this back to you all. And we may need to take action at that point. But I think I don't think anything further is needed from us on House Bill 2224 at this time. Just a refresher, House Bill 2224 dealt with a wide range of topics. It had, I think, changes to fee requirements, and it was really centered on a new arbitration process that would involve the Public Records Advocate. So just to refresh you all on what that bill was. Does anyone have any comments or questions about House Bill 2224?
Stephanie, it's Emily. I do, as a Salem professional, so I don't always know what what the standard is. But when you say he's not expecting to request a hearing, does that mean he's not expecting to try to move this bill forward? Is a hearing does it have to be? Does a hearing have to be held for legislation to go forward, or is he just ditching the idea of pushing this forward at this time in any method?
Great question, Emily. I don't know all of the answer to that. From what I understand, and maybe one of our legislative folks can chime in here, I believe a hearing is the first step.
Yes, confirmed. You would have to have a public hearing before anything got moved.
Thank you, Senator
Thank
Thatcher.
you.
Great. Any other questions about? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
This is Mark Landauer, and before I don't want to actually ask a question about this particular topic. I'm sorry for the diversion. I did note that the governor issued her nominations for the next round of confirmation to the Senate Rules Committee. I failed to look to make sure that Todd was included in the list of names. Can anybody confirm that he was?
Todd, do you have information to share about that today?
Hi, this is Todd. This is the first I'm hearing about it. So if anyone could share the link, I'd be happy to take a look or tell me where to look.
All right, I'm going to start looking through my email. Thank you. I'll find it.
Thank you, Mark. Great question. And feel free to chime in, Mark, if you find more information for us.
Chair Clark.
Yes.
For the record, Les Rurak, Mark, and the others, I received the governor's submission of names, and Mark's the nominee for public record advocate's name was included on that, and I believe it's being scheduled now by rules. I think it may have already been scheduled for this coming week.
Okay. Thank you, Les Rurak, for that note. A member of the public who has noted that Todd is on the list. I don't know how to check right now if that's scheduled, if someone wants to look.
I'm working on it.
Thank you,
I'm
Mark.
not the greatest at this, but I'm looking.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And I think Tony sent
Definitely.
a list. Yes.
Hey, it's Todd Albert.
Yes.
I'm looking on the governor's newsroom website. As Les Rourke said, I am on the list, and according to the governor's website, it says the Senate Rules Committee is scheduled to consider the nominations on February 23rd.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. That's great information. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, that's what I love about this time of year, right, folks? It's ever moving, ever evolving situation. Okay, and Tony's providing the link to that newsroom. Thank you very much, Tony. All right, well, we will wait to hear back from Todd about that. I think that's a public meeting. Folks can watch if they'd like to. And I'm really happy to hear that. That's great news. All right, any other comments, questions about that process before we move on? No. Okay. Since our last meeting, I will note that a new Senate bill has been introduced by Senator Thatcher, and I'm talking about Senate Bill 692. This bill would require each state agency to report to the Attorney General, Public Records Advocate, and Public Records Subcommittee of Legislative Council Committee on number of public records requests received during preceding year and number of those requests still outstanding after specified periods of time. It requires each state agency to include in the report specified information on fee waivers and reductions. And so I was going to ask Senator Thatcher if you have any thoughts you want to share on that bill with the group.
You know, it's a redraft of one that was introduced in 2019, House Bill 2431, that I believe Representative Power was the main sponsor, and there were a few of us also co-chief and all that. But anyway, it's just a redraft. I thought was a good idea. I don't know if somebody else has another bill ssimilar to it, but I put it in right before a deadline, thinking, well, this one needs to be redrafted. If it's not law, it needs to be law, and so it was just kind of a last minute thing. But I think it's a good idea. It kind of gives the PRAC an idea where problems might be and where we might need to adjust the law, or perhaps training, or whatever it is. It just kind of helps give a better picture of the lay of the land on public records requests and how they're going within agencies, how the law is actually working. That's all it is.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that information. And I was not on the council at the time, but I vaguely remember this House Bill 2431. I think, did Ginger testify in support of this bill? Does anyone remember?
Yes,
okay.
She did.
Okay.
There were a number of people submitted testimony. Just look it up under the 2019 session 2431, and you will see all kinds of information about it.
Perfect. Okay, great. So do we have thoughts or questions for Senator Thatcher about that bill? What are people's thoughts on that bill?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Would you mind repeating the bill number currently?
Absolutely. It's Senate Bill 692.
This is Mark Landauer. I just, for the time being, like to thank the Senator for this. I mean, I think that it's valuable information. I'd also like to thank her for not including local governments, at least for the time being.
Well, like I said, it's just a redraft of something that had already been submitted. I thought it was a great idea and needed to be carried forward.
Okay.
I was going to thank you. I appreciate that the knowledge over the years.
Great. Any other thoughts, questions about SB 692? And I don't know, I was not on the council at the time, but I don't know if Ginger, went and testified in support of the original House Bill 2431 of her own volition as the advocate, or was she doing that representing the council? I feel like she was doing it as the advocate, but I don't remember. Does anyone know?
I also don't remember. It's Emilyhurst, but I do remember some negotiations about that ended on the point that Mark just made of focusing it on state agencies, and so it does seem like a bill that would serve the interests of people in understanding what's going on with public records requests and how much time that's taking up at agencies and how agencies are responding and the various things that we're charged with weighing in on.
Okay.
It seems like something the council might want to support.
Okay.
And I'm confirming for you that Ginger was testifying in support. She submitted written testimony of this bill as the public records advocate.
Got it. Okay. So, given that we don't have a permanent advocate at the exact moment, I'm not sure if anyone has strong feelings about, asking the chair on behalf of the PRAC to support the bill and provide written testimony or anything like that. I don't know the time frame on any of this. We are in a little bit of a limbo here where, Todd could be the advocate by the time this gets a hearing. So does anyone have thoughts on how to navigate that?
Well, if I may make just a quick comment, I do think we have, and Todd has to some degree in his sort of current status of limbo, committed to continuing to conduct surveys of both the state and local government, which I'm fully supportive of because we do need information. It seems to me that if this bill were to pass, it would certainly make that survey a heck of a lot more easier for him to undertake and complete. So I would, you know, I don't think that I have any issues with the proposal in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else on the council have thoughts to share?
I'll just jump in here real quickly. I will admit that I have not done a side-by-side comparison of 2431A from 2019 with the draft of Senate Bill 692. It was supposed to be a redraft, but I have not checked it. Sometimes things get lost in communication. We might want to just confirm that it is exactly what we want, you know, before, not that we need that before requesting a hearing, but just perhaps maybe if we have to tweak something here or there, we would have the ability to create some amendments, and we'd be prepared to do so.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. That's something I can do. I can look at those two and compare them.
The fact that it points out data in the bill, and I'm wondering, or just kind of hoping that as you look side by side to ensure that it stays the same, where it says data points to be included in the reports. I'm hoping that that's going to be a more consistent set of data for the public to look at over the years.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm trying to look at it really quick. Well, I might add this to my list of homework to bring back to you all. I can follow up and let you know what's different, if that would be helpful to people.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just skimming them. They do look the same, but
Okay.
I'm sure it's worth going over the fine tooth comb before we actually just, you know, potentially make a motion to support it in some, you know, public way. But they look the same to me right now.
Okay. All right. Well, do I want to entertain a motion? Well, I guess we'll wait and see. I can provide more information to folks about the similarity, or does that matter to the council members before agreeing that we should support this?
I would move, this is left side, so I would move that we, as a council, support this, designate the chair to present testimony as appropriate, with the understanding that the bill actually mirrors the earlier legislation, and if there are material differences, then this approval would be withdrawn and the council would reconsider.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Discussion?
Oh, do we have a member of the public that would like to comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could, prior to the vote.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Scott Forrester, the other Scott. Wanted just to ask a question. I understand which way this is going by the motion, but it was mentioned by one of the other folks here, participants, that they thanked the bill's sponsor for not having local governments. As a person that lives in a city, as most of us do, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? For public records requesters, I don't know statistically what it is, but I would imagine many of the requests go to small entities such as cities or counties, or even special districts like water districts or sewer districts, etc. I'm concerned that we'd have a really good bill, but a bill that leaves out what I would think would be the majority of public records requesting entities. Could someone maybe discuss that a little bit, even though that may not be a part of the motion?
This is Mark Landauer. I'd like to address the question, please.
Go ahead, please.
First of all, the reason why I thanked the senator is because local governments, as the state is as well, are under extreme pressures right now from COVID, wildfire, etc. There are a number of bills before our entities as well that would increase fees, do a whole host of other things that will be difficult. The reason why I thank Senator Thatcher for excluding local governments from this requirement is because, as some members of this council already know, the Public Records Advocate conducts a survey on, I think it's an annual basis, that also, and historically, the one that we have done so far, has included local government. I believe that we can get that information from the survey. I don't think that applying this standard to 36 counties, 100 or 241 cities, 194 school districts, and over 1,000 special districts in the state of Oregon is necessarily going to teach us anything more than what we can glean from an annual survey. Thank you.
Stephanie, it's Emilyhurst. I'd like to also comment, if I may.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to say I appreciate that. And local governments are under dire pressure right now. I do want to point out that, of course, the last time this went through, they weren't facing the same kind of pressure because we didn't have that coming off this year of intense wildfires for 2 years and the COVID pressure as well. But it's an ongoing concern that local governments don't have the kind of money to do this. And I think that what this underscores for me is the need going forward to develop records management programs that actually make this simple, make it really easy both to fulfill records requests, but also to track them, to have that kind of data. And so I think that really, points up that as we think about helping local governments manage data and data requests and public records requests and information that the public wants to know about how their very local governments are operating, I think it's worth our time to explore our responsibilities and our opportunities to help make that easier for them, because it is a burden. And it's also a really important, vital piece of a democracy. So I think that it is a lacking in this bill that it doesn't gather information in a very specific manner from everyone, because surveys are definitely glean. You can definitely get good information, but it's different than full data. However, I think that this sets a great precedent. I think it's something that's accomplishable, and I think it will make a significant difference without being too burdensome. And so I think it may lay the groundwork for further developing transparency in Oregon, even though it may not be, the most thorough or perfect bill that we could put forth in a different reality. But so I acknowledge your needs, the needs you pointed out, Scott, and I also think that this is something worth supporting for what it can do.
Thank you, Emily.
This is Tony. If I can say something.
Please.
Mr. Forster, I hate hearing if there was an implication that my gratitude to Senator Thatcher meant any kind of disregard or disrespect to local and city government. That definitely was not the intention. I'm very grateful to all the team members here that have been over the years, and in my ears, as I heard, why the proposal came through was looking out for unfinished work and unfinished business that I certainly, as someone who doesn't monitor the daily workings of inside the Capitol, appreciate looking out. So that's where I came from the team aspect, not from trying to diminish or exclude, trying to leave out the impact of and the need of data from cities and counties and the smaller districts. But you got to start small, I guess, and I think starting with the state agencies would be a good test run, and maybe go bigger later.
Thank you, Tony. Very good points. I don't want to speak.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
This is Scott Forster. I wanted to speak to the two previous speakers, Ms. Harris, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you. I think it's great. It's a great start, sounds like, and I appreciate just speaking to the question. of maybe including the other jurisdictions, city special districts in the future. As I guess Mr. Landauer mentioned about all the special districts, it's great. He had all the numbers, you know, like thousands of these little entities. But again, that's where the rubber meets the road. And frankly, in the city I live in, they don't issue an annual report. They don't have a summary of how many public records requests. In fact, a lot of the departments handle them independently. They don't talk to each other. They have no clue of what they're actually doing at their jurisdiction. So if there was a future mandate or request that they actually assimilate this information, it would not only educate us, but it would educate them, because they may not even be aware of the flows that are going on, the costs associated, and some of the decisions, and a lack of having the continuity where one department may charge an exorbitant public records fee where the other may do a waiver for a similar record. So I do appreciate the council hearing my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forrester.
Thanks for the engagement.
Tony,
Chair Clark,
Yes.
can I add a comment too, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
For the record, Les Rurak out in the hinterlands. I just want to chime in with what Mr. Forrester has said today, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rurak. Points well received, I think, on our end. We know there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. I would agree that starting with state agencies is a good kind of test case. I don't want to speak for Todd Albert, but I don't know how he would enjoy receiving data from 3,000 different government entities across Oregon all at once while trying to set up an office. So I think from everyone's perspective, starting with state agencies would be great, a good step in the right direction. That's how I feel about it. So any other council members? I see we have Scott Winkles and Steve Suo who have joined us. Scott and Steve, just to fill you in, we are talking about Senate Bill 692, introduced by Senator Thatcher, which would require state agencies to submit information about public records requests tracking, and it's very similar to House Bill 2431 from the 2019 legislative session. So we were taking some public comment. I'm not a procedural genius, so Mark, do you know if we need to restart the motion or if it is still on the table?
Well, I don't want to act as a parliamentarian because I'll tie us up into a pretzel before you know it. So I think that the motion has been seconded. We had discussion, and I think that we're cleared to take a vote at this point. Okay, so for Scott and Steve, the motion put forth by Les Seitz was that I, as the chair, if there is a hearing scheduled for Senate Bill 692, I am to write written testimony and testify in support of Senate Bill 692 introduced by Senator Thatcher. And that is where we're at.
Can I just ask?
Yes,
can I just ask a quick question?
Please,
so basically, you've reviewed this, Stephanie, and it basically doesn't differ in any substantive way from what we advocated for, whatever it was 2 years ago.
Well, several of us have been reviewing it on the fly and during this meeting, and we do not see any major departures from that. But if we notice one, we will. The motion does not stand. It is basically, yeah. If it's similar enough to House Bill 2431, then we will move forward with supporting.
This is Les.
Yeah, thanks.
The motion did include a provision that if a careful analysis comparing the earlier draft with 692 produces some material difference, that the support would be withdrawn until the council could consider those changes. So the intent of the motion is that the council proceed with supporting it unless there's some finding that there's been some material change. Is that fairly stated?
Thank you, Les. Yeah, that's perfect. So I have received my first and second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Do I have any opposed? Okay, none. Let's see, looking at the chat, Emilyhurst has read it line by line. It looks exactly identical to her. Thank you very much, Emily, for doing that. And as I mentioned, we are in the middle of session here. We are receiving new things all the time. Scott and Steve, you did miss, and maybe you already know this, but Todd Albert has been scheduled for a hearing to be confirmed February 23rd. So we learned that kind of on the fly during this meeting. Very exciting. So stay tuned on that.
And I'd like to nominate Emilyhurst as our future bill comparer.
I'll have to get a raise for that.
Second, no. Yeah.
Everyone, I don't know what we just voted on, but this is Michael Crone. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I was in another
Hello,
meeting.
Michael. Nice to hear from you.
Here. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Nice to hear everyone's voices. Sounds like we're having a fun conversation and a fun meeting. So
We
happy
are.
to be here.
We are. Thank you for joining us. We voted that I am going to represent the PRAC in supporting Senate Bill 692, which is a reporting bill that's very similar to House Bill 2431 from the 2019 session. And I will leave it at that. Oh,
Yes. No, I've seen that bill, so that's great.
okay. Thank you, Michael. All right. Moving along, I wanted to ask Senator Thatcher if she had any other bills she wanted to talk about at all. And I don't actually know the answer to this. I'm just offering you the floor, Senator Thatcher.
I appreciate that. That's the only one that I could think of at this time.
Okay.
If I come up with anything, I'll write to you.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And I do want to introduce a special guest today. We do have Tom Holt, who is representing the Society of Professional Journalists. And from what I understand, Tom is going to speak with us about a number of bills that are important to that association this session. So if you'd like to have the floor, Tom.
Well, thank you for making time for me on the invitation. SBJ, as you know, has great interest in public records and access to records. We have 4 bills that we've introduced. As you know, there's a number of bills concerning public records that are of interest. Just for starters, I should say that SBJ is very supportive of the direction of the PRAC bill, Senate Bill 500. We'll look forward to looking at the amendments on that and hope to be able to support that in the hearing that it has coming up. We have a bill that we introduced on public records fees, 2485, and I think I've had a discussion with at least one of you and some others outside the PRAC about this. What I understand is there's a history here that there was some discussion about public records fees in the PRAC prior to this year, but with the events of the prior year, it just had not been able to become a PRAC agenda item. So I guess we're interested in learning about the PRAC's intent around having that discussion in relation to that bill and what we do with that. The other one that I would call your attention to is House Bill 2486. This is around a pain point that for a lot of folks, immediate access to emergency incidents, things like wildfires and other large emergency incidents and perhaps small ones too. I've had discussions with a number of public safety people, and that is a bill that's going to be worked on quite a bit. As introduced, it certainly needs some refinement, and we'll be working on that. The other one that I, excuse me, wanted to flag is the 2487 is around disciplinary records of public safety officers. There's been what I would call an adjacent conversation around creation of a special database on that. This is about those records of substantial investigations being accessible via public records request. And so we're working on that. And then recently introduced, there was two, I think they're identical bills. One of them is actually ours. Senate Bill 719 and Senate Bill 722 both address recent behavior of the health authority in refusing to release aggregate data that is derived from an appropriately protected database of individual health information on reportable diseases. Some of you who are media members of the panel will remember there was a story last summer where the OHA released a graphic on COVID-19 cases and declined to release the numbers used to build that graphic, citing a statute that throws a really strong protection around the mandatory report database. So the bills, both those bills specifically address that issue. 719 is ours, and I just saw 722 appear also this week, and that look at that is that's a committee bill from Senator Gelser's committee. So those are some of the ones that we're watching or working on ourselves. There are a couple that have been brought to our attention. There's a Senate Bill 104, comes from the Office of Emergency Management, and that has to do with wildfire access specifically, and it seems aimed at broadcasters. Not our bill, but we're a lot of the same people interested in that probably are also interested in our bill around media credentials for emergency incidents. And then there's one around attorney-client privilege, House Bill 2478. That is from the city of Portland, and it's aligning statute with some litigation of recent years around that. And it doesn't really have, to our eyes, doesn't have a practical effect on access to records today. There was some kind of court decision that put a statute of limitations, so to speak, on privilege documents of 25 years in some instances, but in general, privilege is privilege and lasts forever, and that's what that bill does. And so we're neutral on that bill after having discussed it with the city of Portland. There was a bill moved or heard yesterday, Senate Bill 90, I believe, in the has to do with human services clients, people who are mentally disabled in some fashion, brain injury patients, and other folks who are residing in adult foster homes. And it's basically creating a state level type of HIPAA level protection. The identities of those individuals would be not considered public record, but the business information of an adult foster home still would be subject to public disclosure. And we agreed to support that bill, or agree to the bill, I should say, and worked with DHS to create a record around what the bill does and doesn't do. So that's the quick rundown of some of the things we're working on. Again, would be very interested either now or following up with staff on what your plans are around these discussions. I know you all have had a lot going on, among them getting the PRACS bill going and getting your public records advocate confirmed, so you've been a little busy. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tom. Does anyone have any questions for Tom today?
This is Steve Sewell. I do have a question. Tom, Thank you for coming. It sounded like you were particularly seeking feedback on 2485. Is that what you were alluding to in terms of our discussion?
Yes.
So the issue of capping, I guess, labor costs for purpose of fees at $25 an hour, and that's something that has come up. It's partially patterned, I guess, against the DAS fee schedule that we've discussed before. But there's also, I guess, a public record or a public interest component. Do you mind, like, kind of, actually, you know it better than I. Can you walk us through, or Representative Powers, if she's here, I guess, walk us through what it does and what do you think the merits are?
Well, thank you. The big picture thrust of the bill is that it would reduce those costs in half. I think the question I have that's been brought up to me is that this may be an issue that the PRAC intends to dive into it on its own outside the legislative process, and so we are interested in not being at cross purposes.
So this is Mark Landauer, and I'd like to speak to this issue because I believe perhaps Tom's reference in speaking to a member of the PRAC could very well have been me. So I did have a conversation with Mr. Holt, and this was several weeks ago, but at that time, Tom and I should say Mr. Holt and I had a nice cordial conversation as usual about this very issue. And what I shared with Tom was this. You all may very well recall, at least for those of you who've been on the PRAC since its inception, that during one late summer meeting that we held, when it became very clear that our previous public records advocate was going to submit or had submitted her letter of resignation to the governor, we had a very robust conversation about a number of topics. One of those being the charges that are attributable to members of the press. At that time, I committed, and I certainly cannot comment on behalf of my other public members of public representatives on this council, but I gave my commitment that that was an issue that needed to be addressed by the PRAC, and that I committed my word to taking that issue on. Now, needless to say, we have been distracted for a good part of a year and a half since I was able to make that commitment, and I fully intend to pursue this issue when the time is appropriate. I also shared with Mr. Holt that the biggest challenge that I have dealing with this particular issue is defining who the media is. And I think I made that very clear to Mr. Holt, because I think I made it very clear to him that that could be a challenge with his bill entering into emergency areas, for example. What we in public government are trying to avoid, and I'm certainly not attempting in any way, shape, or form to besmirch anybody, but what we are not interested in is everybody walking into a public body and them claiming that they are members of the media in order to achieve a reduction in the price of public records that they request. I know that this is a difficult request of FPJ and those who are asking for a reduction in the cost, because in some ways, I do believe that when a legitimate member of the press is making a request for public records, there's an inherent public interest that is involved. That is the position that I hold. And so I am more than willing to enter into these conversations. But my request again of Mr. Holt was, if you guys can come up with a definition of who the media is, I'm willing to walk down that road with you. So, and I believe Mr. Suo, I hope, because I was the one who gave my word to Mr. Suo that we would have this conversation. Mr. Holt, we just haven't had that opportunity yet, regrettably. And it's largely been due to the fact that we have been trying to hire, get nominated a new public records advocate. We've finally gotten to that point, not once, but twice now. So I remain committed to having that conversation. I think I have some ideas on how we might be able to reach the end of this conversation. But again, it's premised largely on the notion that we need to know or have a commonly accepted definition of who the media is. And I'll shut up at this point. But that was my commitment that was made well over a year and a half ago, and I have not forgotten that.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else have thoughts or questions for Tom? Comments?
Yeah, I wanted, since we're talking about it, I first wanted to point out for openness, I sat on the national board of SBJ several years ago before I moved to Oregon. But interestingly enough, kind of my time there was a big debate about changing the name to the Society of Professional Journalism versus journalists. And we're treading First Amendment areas, I think, when you're trying to identify a media company to an individual that deserves the same kind of access. Now, I understand, given especially the stuff that has happened in 2021 with security issues, you know, SBJ at one point had credentials or something like that. I know that there's a way to honor the journalism, but still provide access to those that want to practice what's protected in the Constitution.
It's Emily. Can I join in to add a comment?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, please go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I just shared in the chat a very old, like 18, 19-year-old collection, this by the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, on how different states actually do define journalists. They do this is in the context of providing protection to journalists so that they don't have to divulge sources, because that is a very important tool, although I will say straight up, can be abused as well. But it's a very important tool in the freedom of the press. So that is, yes, like I said, very old. It was, these are in very specific, this is a very different framework. Shield laws are very different framework than fee reductions. But I offer that as a possible place for people to start thinking about that. And I'm interested, you know, whether anyone on this council, you know, Mark, especially as you've given this some thought, have you thought about how you would define the media, journalists, et cetera? I mean, we are, of course, talking about public records generally, so this is part of the, you know, operations of government belonging to all people, but like, how would you, have you thought about it at all? It's a tricky question, so I don't blame you if you haven't.
Well, I will admit that I have not given it as much thought as Mr. Winkle.
Well, actually, we didn't just give it thought when we did, going back into the Wayback Machine to 2008. We actually did, when we wrote with ONPA, and I believe SBJ was in the room, the executive session access local policies, and the issue was people who had formed blogs specifically to access executive sessions so that they could hear executive sessions in regards to real estate they may or may not have owned or wish to own. It was all very unfortunate, but so we had a policy in place that allowed the local government to set a list of criteria and list the outlets in theirs, and there were some criteria, things like, was there an editor? Are they providing news of a general source? I can dig up the policy that we developed, I don't think it's not a clear, I don't think we could just cut and paste it into this, but I think it might be instructive. And I think we had all signed off on it back when I had brown hair and more of it.
Forgot to
That
mention
would help.
Well, I think in going back, look, Emily and Steve and Tom, and frankly, we had a very direct conversation with Representative Power. I believe it was in 2019, where we talked about this very topic, where and Mr. Budnick isn't here at the moment, but we did have a conversation in a room in the House side of the Capitol talking about this very issue, at which time I had made it very clear to Nick and SPJ, bring us a definition. And needless to say, that bill didn't ultimately get heard. It may have been heard, but it never moved forward. I still remain committed to this conversation again, but my challenge is, on behalf of my clients, how do they determine who is a member of the media? Because once this gets out that the media gets a discount, everybody is going to, they're a member of the media. That's an uncomfortable position. I don't think our folks very much appreciate state guidance. Our folks would very much appreciate the state's guidance on who is and who is not considered a member of the media for the purposes of this type of discount or fee waiver.
Yeah. Hey, could I respond to that? So first of all, Mark, I appreciate your, you've mentioned this several times, and I appreciate your commitment to, to having the discussion. It does sound like, looking at what Emily shared and what Scott's alluded to, I mean, it's not like we're starting from zero in terms of defining the news media. I mean, this is this discussion has been had. There are precedents elsewhere. There's precedent in Oregon case law for defining the public interest, which at times has been linked to ability to reach a wide audience or to provide information for general consumption. So I'm not saying that gets us to a definition, but it seems like, again, it's not necessarily a 2-year process to figure out the answer. So I guess I would just say I wouldn't preclude. It seems like it would be possible for stakeholders to gather and hash that out conceivably in this session. I mean, that's not for me to decide, but this isn't the only venue where that could take place, particularly if it seems like we're close on something like that. I guess the one thing I would add is, the notion of a public interest discount for journalists or a presumption of public interest for journalists comes from the federal FOIA. It's been there for a long time. So in the question of whether people will come out of the woodwork asserting that I'm a journalist and I should get out of jail free, that's an answerable question. We can talk to people who handle federal FOIAs to see whether that's abused. And maybe that would be something worth pursuing here.
Thank you, Steve. Tom, did you have anything else?
No, that's all I have for today. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate
Tom,
it.
can I ask a question?
I have a question.
Yeah, it's Emily again, Emilyhurst. I'm just interested, like, how much, in your other discussions about the bill, or like if you think this is an area to explore to try to push this bill forward. If SPJ wants to continue to push it forward during the session, this definition, is that something you guys have talked about? Where are you on that?
Well, I would say the definition question is also in play around the emergency access and credentialing bill. So, we're going to be having active discussion around that. how we define that, and so I think it applies both places. I think it's a little early in the session to decide for sure whether this particular bill is moving forward, because we just got the last big bolus of initial introductions yesterday. The government's kind of sorting through what priorities are.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Caller 9, did you have something to share?
Am I caller 9, Michael Cohn?
You are.
All right, now I know that I'm caller 9. I was just going to mention, because we were talking about the definition of news media, and Scott and Mark brought up the public meetings and the ability to attend executive sessions. I think in addition to the Lake Oswego, I think it was Lake Oswego policy that they were talking about, there's a 2016 Attorney General opinion on the question that also might be a useful starting point for us, but I'm happy to send to the group.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
So,
I wanted to, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I also, since, I sit on as a member of the public, and I'm thinking about the public side of, as a non-journalist, as a recovering journalist, someone looking to get police chief data or something that, a $25 cost sounds great, but if I don't have the luxury of corporate journalism to back me up, and I just have a couple of blog posts, it just sounds like, well, long story short, it would be great to have equity considerations when this bill is being crafted beyond government and newspapers, thinking about nonprofit organizations that are looking now more than ever to hold both sides accountable.
Thank you, Tony. Scott Winkles, did you have something to say?
I did, Tom. Thank you so much for getting to a neutral on the attorney-client privilege bill. That's pretty important to us in terms of protecting our legal advice. Also on the bill related to police misconduct, that's getting wrapped up into the work of the Equitable Policing Subcommittee of Judish right now, and so there are several database reporting issues there. I mean, I wouldn't expect that bill would move forward as a standalone, but I would think that the place to watch for that concept would be in equitable policing. Other people could disagree, but I think that weaves in pretty tight to some of the work that's being done there. So,
yeah, I think that's correct.
Anyone else have any thoughts about what we've been going over?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead, caller 6.
Okay, this is Scott Forrester. So wanted to mention, go back to 90, but before that, stick with, I guess we're talking 2485 House Bill. So for Mr. Holt, I guess a general comment would be kind of echoing Tony Hernandez's comment, which is I would like the PRAC to also represent regular citizens that aren't journalists, which Tony Hernandez is there in representing us, but also think about all the aspiring journalists that probably never will be, because it's frankly not a good business model at the current time. Journalism is going through an absolute upheaval. So the idea of defining what a journalist is nowadays with the massive changes, is really a newspaper the only thing, is only a TV station? And then of course, what level? Like if you're a local online only, is that legitimate, or do you have to be national? So frankly, I look at the Society of Professional Journalists as kind of like representing the big cats. And so I would like to just have you, well, you can smile, but your aspiring future journalists are going to be people that aren't necessarily trained in journalism or can't even afford journalism school, but they're in there every day, sometimes for years or decades, hammering away at public records law that often professional journalists feed on only after it comes to a head where, oh my God, it's raised to our attention. So I just want to kind of just bring that to sensitize you that when you're in negotiations, apparently with some of these other people that are lobbyists for their various entities that they represent on a professional basis, keep in mind that I know you're representing your organization, but please think about all the little journalists out there that aren't, quote, professionals. So I like the idea Tony Hernandez said that maybe you guys will someday say journalism instead of journalists, which might actually allow people such as myself and others that might aspire to be journalists to actually join your organization, where right now I and others cannot join because we're not, quote, professionals. On the 2485, I'm concerned just from the summary that it says that you can reduce fees by 50% if it's made in the public interest. So first off, a lot of local jurisdictions are going to argue that it's not in the public interest, especially if they know it's sensitive information or political information they don't want to get out. So they may just take an adversarial position as they do now anyway. So again, that leaves discretion. And then the other one is waive fees if it's narrowly tailored. From my understanding, is that actually would be more restrictive than the current law, which says that you can get public records requests waived under certain conditions, but they don't use the word narrowly tailored. So this actually looks like that would actually be more restrictive and give jurisdictions the excuse to actually not give a fee waiver if this passes, because they'll just say it's not narrowly tailored. And this comes back to the professional, where so media organizations maybe have lawyers that can actually fight this in court. The average Joe or aspiring journalist or local citizens trying to know about their government may not be able to afford a lawyer. And so if there's pushback, they're not going to push back with a lawyer, where the Oregonian or the Society of Professional Journalists or others would basically answer with a lawyer and maybe get what the little guy doesn't get. So when you're saying you're for something, please again sensitize the idea that there are people out there that actually read your product and your corporations that are part of your organization. And so think about us, that are also out there. Then on 90, apparently you said you're for that. I just want to bring the attention that here in the Portland area, there was at least one situation I'm aware of where one of the individuals that had developmental disabilities was in a group home in a neighborhood. So it looks like a home like anywhere else, but inside is like, 5 persons with developmental disabilities. And that person committed a crime, a hate crime against a person that was a person from another country, a refugee, that was a next door neighbor that owned their house. So this house is being leased and run on behalf of a state of Oregon permit. And one of the persons with developmental disabilities under the care of the state of Oregon and a permit from the state of Oregon basically threatened this refugee next door with killing their dog, and then also went on later to smash the window and smash the car of the refugee with a rock. These people are of different colors and of different backgrounds. Now that could be considered a hate crime. Number one, the police showed up and said, we're not going to do a report because these people aren't independently able to make decisions. So they basically deferred to the state and didn't even write a report. And number two, if this passes and you can't know the names and addresses of the individual, how does a citizen such as this neighbor press for litigation or talk with the state or whoever about getting damages, or who's the owner, the leasee, on behalf of the state to try to get recompense for the damages or even to potentially litigate? So I'm just concerned. This seemed to come up at the same time that this situation occurred. The state's aware of it. It looks like the governor's carrying the water for the Department of Human Services, but I think that background's missing. So it looks like they're looking to protect, but at the same time, who's protecting the innocent neighbor who got threats and who got property damage from one of these people that are being cared for under a state permit? Could you comment, sir?
Well, I'll just comment about the size of outlet piece. SPJ has members who are affiliated with news organizations of a wide variety of sizes, some quite tiny, some web-based only, as you mentioned. I can't speak to the unfortunate incident that you just described. The thrust of the bill is only in relation to DHS services, but I would leave it to DHS to explain more of the technical pieces of that. I'm not an expert on law enforcement access to information.
Thank you, Tom.
I had a comment just in response on 2485. First of all, I really appreciate all of your comments, and I think that they are important considerations. And the public records law is for everyone in Oregon, for sure. All of us agree with that. And I think I just wanted to point out with 2485, it's my understanding, and Tom, maybe you can respond to this. My understanding that this does not eliminate the existing public interest test. There is still the ability of anybody to make a public interest argument in requesting a fee waiver. What it does is it creates a presumption of public interest for members, for people who are professional journalists. Now that that the two-tier system, or that additional privilege, I guess, if you will, may still be concerning for you, but there is still this avenue. And in terms of the 50% reduction for a narrowly tailored request, there again, it does not preclude a public body from granting a waiver of what the request as it stands. The narrowing of the request, it gives to my mind, it is a step ahead from where we stand now, where it's very hard in many cases to get to a fee waiver. And I think it encourages the discussion between the requester and the public body that can get to yes in more cases than we currently do. So that's the appeal for me. It's not. I agree. It's like they should give us what we ask for, but it doesn't work out that way right now. And I think this could be a step in the right direction, honestly.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone have any more thoughts about House Bill 2485? Well, I think folks shared a lot of really good points today. I think we heard from a wide variety of perspectives on this. I'm not feeling that the council necessarily has a consensus or a mandate for me to move forward necessarily today, but I think we leave it open-ended and maybe continue the conversation at the next meeting, depending on how things are moving with this bill. Does that sound okay with folks?
Yeah, and I just want to offer, I brought up I'm happy to help provide equity voice. I actually just, after being unemployed, I'm now working at a nonprofit that really promotes equity, and it's led by immigrant and refugee families. And so there is an opportunity for the public to work in crafting some legislation, and this sounds like it would be a good one. So if you and the memory to research this, I would be happy to help provide someone who can speak for.
Thank you very much, Tony. All right. I believe that I do have marching orders for going forward with representing you all for SB 692. We also have Todd's hearing to look forward to. I'm not sure that we will need to meet every 2 weeks during session. I will assess that as things progress with different bills. And if I think we need to meet, I'll go ahead and keep that on the calendar. Otherwise, I might cancel a few coming up. We'll just see. We'll see how things move. I don't want to waste folks' time to meet for no reason, but I also want to keep things moving. So I will update you after the hearing on Thursday. I will put all of that information also up on the website. And I'll keep you all posted about Todd's hearing if we get more information about that. Does anyone else have anything else to share today for today's meeting?
If I may.
Please, Mark.
I just wanted to take a quick moment, Stephanie, to compliment you and your leadership for this committee, or I should say council. I know you were thrown into a difficult situation. I think that you've demonstrated a unique set of characteristics and leadership, and you've really made a big difference in the work of this council for the last year and a half. I wanted to just recognize you. I know that the new Secretary of State has identified Molly Woon to take over for you at some point in the not too distant future. Before you left, I wanted to just personally thank you for all the work that you've done on behalf of this council and for, frankly, the citizens of Oregon. I think you've really done a terrific job keeping us cats on the reservation, if you will. And I know that we're trying to escape all the time, but you really did a terrific job. And I want to just personally thank you for all the work that you've done. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate that. And thanks everyone for hanging in there with me. It's been very interesting, good experience. And you're not losing me altogether. I will be hanging around to voice my opinions from time to time. So
Please do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. So with that, if we don't have any other new business, I think we're ready to adjourn. All right. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right. That's it for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephanie.